Hello and welcome to a look at Street Fighter 2 World Warrior for the Commodore 64, a Capcom arcade original that was released by US Gold. Street Fighter 2 obviously is the sequel to Street Fighter, a game that gained some popularity, but it wasn't really before Street Fighter 2 World Warrior that the series managed to take off in the arcades at a larger scale. And as far as I know, the franchise is still going strong and all for the better, I would say. I love beat 'em ups, by the way. The concept of the game is that you play one of 8 different characters who all wants to prove something or another, whether they want to be the greatest fighter or they want to win something or whatever might be the case, and then travel around the world and beat other fighters to get a shot at the top 3 fighters in the world. Once you have engaged and defeated them, you get a shot at the ultimate top fighter, and if you manage to defeat that character as well, you are the ultimate. You have done what you sought out to do, and you can give yourself a pat on the back and feel good about beating pixels into oblivion. Now the question is, why would anyone even consider converting something like Street Fighter 2 for the 8-bit systems? Because it's a game that is predominantly a spectacle fighter. It is a game that relies not only on the gameplay, of course, but also very heavily on graphics and sound and flow of the game. And it would require someone very, very skilled or very, very good at making a clever adaptation of the original material in order to make it work. Something like Special Effects did with Cabal for the Commodore 64. But obviously, as I think has become very, very clear for anyone actually watching the video, if you can tolerate to do so, finding such people would have been a massive challenge, and yeah, I will get back to that a bit later. Let's do the technical stuff. From a graphical point of view, it's not good. The versus screens look like they have been taken directly from the 16-bit conversions and force converted onto the Commodore 64, losing a lot of definition and a lot of color in the process. And that's not saying much, because the Amiga version, while playable, is not necessarily the best looking game ever made. The main sprites are small-ish, but you know what, I can tolerate that. I have no issue with that. The problem is that the different characters, you have to use a fair bit of imagination to actually be able to tell that the blob you are in control of is actually the character it says on the screen that it is. The backgrounds are surprisingly decent all round, but the main sprite, which is of course where your focus is, yeah, it's not pretty and it's not animated particularly well. When it comes to the sound side of things, the music is a very, very, very short loop, and even though it has 2 intonations of the same loop, it is still the same loop, and it gets incredibly tedious incredibly quickly. The sound effects, which we will get to listen to a bit later, they sound like they have been whole cloth lifted from some shoot 'em up from 1983 or something. They are so incredibly misplaced and not fitting for a game of this type, and it sounds completely and utterly rubbish. When it comes to the control side of things, yeah. Now, I could sit here and spend a lot of time talking about the minute details of the controls, but the only thing you need to know when it comes to the controls is you pick Ryu, or I would assume Ken, because they fight in the same way. Then you push towards your opponent, and then you hit the fire button, and you will do the hurricane kick. Ryu's most powerful ability, which in other conversions require a certain amount of joystick juggling in order to activate, because of course that is a balance consideration. It needs to be difficult to activate because it's powerful, but not in this version. Push towards your opponent and hit the fire button, and hurricane kick all day long. And that makes any other control related to this character at least completely and utterly superfluous. I don't know whether other characters are in a similar boat, that they have one super powerful ability that is incredibly easy to activate, because honestly I didn't bother to find out. Then we come to the gameplay, and as you can likely gather, this game's gameplay is all about fighting individuals and having a good time doing so, because it's cool and fun. But that of course requires that it is cool and fun, which would be a very far stretch to claim is the case for this particular version. The footage you see is my first game played of this game, and I actually played parts of a second game just to test if it was because of the difficulty being at a medium level. So I tested a second game playing at the highest difficulty level and discovered that it made absolutely no difference. Push towards your opponent playing as Ryu and hit the fire button, and if they're dumb enough to jump, they are at your mercy and get hit several times by the hurricane kick, and if you land 3-4 hurricane kicks, you defeat any opponent in the game. I think it can be very easy to forget that back in the time around the release of this game, there was no such thing as the internet as we know it. So basically you were relying on the monthly publications of various different game review magazines in order to have any sort of knowledge about whether a potential game was worth investing your hard-earned money in. Of course, coincidences does happen, and coincidentally it occurred that certain times review copies were not sent out. And just as coincidentally, games were published 2-3 days after the monthly publications had already been published. So any potential customer could find themselves in a position where a game was released and there was no information available concerning whether the game was worth buying or not. On top of that, of course, we found a situation where certain absurdly poor games were given absurdly high review scores. And if you are relying on a certain source of information to do an educated purchase, and that source of information certainly turns out to be unreliable, then you find yourself up the famous creek, not only without the paddle, but also without the boat. when it comes to knowing whether you are wasting your money or it is a good investment. I don't know if you noticed, but at the start of the video, there was a certain screen that I found interesting. And as such, I have allowed myself to draw attention to it by highlighting the text. And I will happily give you a full translation of what it actually says because I speak corporate bullshit fluently. What this actually says is we are very, very sorry that we couldn't find anyone qualified enough to make a decent or remotely playable conversion of this game for the Commodore 64, but we decided to do it anyway. And we will happily charge you $12.99 for the tape version or $17.99 for the disc version, not giving a monkey's butt about how screwed you feel when you realize the quality of this game is absolute garbage. On that note, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye for now.